They called him a prince, but he had never seen his own face. From the moment of his birth, his chamber was stripped of mirrors, polished metal or glass. Servants were forbidden to describe his features. Even water was poured before him only when stirred, so no reflection would form. He grew day by day, surrounded by whispers, but never answers. "Am I handsome? Am I monstrous?" he asked. They smiled, but never told. By the time he turned 16, his curiosity had become unbearable. He demanded the truth. The king relented, handing him a mirror, an object the boy had never known existed. What followed shook the palace. The prince stared at the face in the glass, froze, then screamed. With his nails, he clawed at his skin, shrieking that a demon had stolen his body. Guards had to wrestle him to the ground. But as blood dripped from his face, one question echoed in the corridors. If he did not recognize himself, then who or what did he see staring back? The prince's childhood was unlike any other. His cradle stood in a chamber where no object shone, no surface glimmered, no flicker of himself was ever returned to his eyes. When he reached out as a toddler, there was only the world beyond his fingertips, never his likeness staring back. This was not an accident. Court whispers claimed it was prophecy. The royal astrologer, on the night of his birth, declared that if the child ever recognized his own face, madness would follow, and the dynasty would fall. Others said it was cruelty disguised as caution, a father testing whether a boy raised without self-image could become a weapon, obedient and hollow. Every servant lived in fear. To slip even once and let the boy glimpse his reflection meant death. Polished silver spoons were banned. Basins of water were emptied before he entered. Even stories of beauty or ugliness were forbidden. When he asked what it meant to be fair, no one dared answer. When he asked if his nose curved like his father's, or if his eyes were sharp like his mother's, they knelt trembling and changed the subject. Yet the boy was not blind to the truth. He knew there was something missing. Other children laughed when they caught sight of themselves in a soldier's blade or in a puddle after rain. He watched their delight with quiet envy, never understanding what they had found that he could not. By 12, his questions grew sharper. He began touching his own face obsessively, tracing the edges of his lips, the ridge of his cheekbones, the sockets of his eyes. He could describe the map of himself by memory, yet had no proof that it matched reality. "What am I?" he whispered to his nurse. "Am I cursed? Am I human?" She pressed her lips together until they turned white, unwilling to betray the truth, unwilling to even guess. The isolation bred something strange in him. Without an anchor, his identity drifted like smoke. At times, he believed himself radiant, a figure of divine beauty. At other times, he was convinced he was malformed, a monster hidden from sight. Each night, he lay in bed trembling, certain that the reason he had never been shown his reflection was because it was too horrifying to bear. And yet, he still longed to know. The hunger gnawed at him more fiercely than hunger for food, more painfully than thirst. Knowledge denied became obsession. He begged his father. He bribed guards. He tried to catch glimpses in spilled wine or the shine of armor. But every attempt was thwarted, every betrayal silenced, until his 16th birthday. The king, either out of pride or fatigue, decided the boy had earned the truth. Perhaps he wanted to prove the prophecy false. Perhaps he wanted to break the boy's spirit completely. That night, servants carried a mirror into the chamber, a simple square of glass framed in carved wood. For most, it was ordinary. For him, it was an artifact from another world. The boy approached it cautiously, as though it might breathe or move. His hand hovered over the glass, and then his face appeared. The scream tore from his throat before thought could form. He staggered backward, his eyes wide, his body shaking. What he saw was not himself, but a stranger, a mockery, an intruder. He clawed his cheeks, ripped his lips, raked his forehead, desperate to peel the mask away. Guards rushed in, but his voice echoed through the corridors, raw and guttural. "It has taken me! The demon has taken me!" Blood smeared across the mirror as he struggled against the men who restrained him. His body writhed like something possessed. He refused to believe the reflection belonged to him. In his mind, he had been replaced, stolen, erased. The room without reflections had shaped him, and now it had destroyed him. But the question that haunted the palace long after that night was this: had the prophecy created the madness, or had the madness been waiting all along, fed by the silence of every servant, every parent, every shadowed wall? The mirror was taken away. The servants scrubbed the blood from the floor. The king ordered silence. But silence could not contain what had been unleashed. The boy, no, the young man, refused to eat for days. He sat curled in the corner, trembling, whispering to himself. When guards tried to lift him, he fought like an animal, spitting and biting. His words made no sense at first, only fragments, stolen, hollow, not me. But soon his mutterings became coherent enough to terrify those who heard them. He lives in the glass, the prince hissed. The demon that wears my skin. He smiles when I move, but he is not me. He waits to step out and take my place. No soothing words could calm him. No priest's prayers could banish his fear. He had seen what no child should see. Not his reflection, but an intruder that looked too much like him to deny and too little like him to accept. His father, furious, demanded that he be beaten until reason returned. The flogging left his back raw, but his mind did not yield. Instead, it twisted further. He began to scratch lines into the walls, crude carvings of faces, some beautiful, some grotesque, all distorted. He claimed each was the same figure, the same false self that haunted him. Nights grew worse. Servants reported screams, not of pain, but of confrontation, as though he argued with voices no one else could hear. He demanded torches lit at all times, terrified that the darkness would allow the demon in the glass to slip closer. He refused to drink water unless it was stirred cloudy, fearing that the still surface would reveal the face again. The court physicians called it madness. The priest called it possession. But some whispered that this was no illness. It was the natural result of a life stripped of recognition, a human soul starved of the simple truth of self. By his 17th year, he demanded proof from others. He seized his tutor by the collar and screamed, "Am I this face? Tell me, is it mine or is it yours?" The old man stammered, too terrified to answer. The boy struck him down and fled, howling through the halls. The king, now regretting his decision, ordered the mirror destroyed, but the damage was irreversible. Once seen, the image could not be unseen. The boy carried it within him, a parasite lodged in his mind. And yet, there was something stranger still. One night, he slipped into the queen's chamber. She awoke to find him crouched at her bedside, his nails caked with dried blood, his eyes wild. "Mother," he whispered, "when you look at me, do you see me or do you see him?" Her hands trembled as she reached for him. "You are my son," she said softly, but he shook his head. "No, you say that because he tells you to. He has replaced me. He speaks through my mouth. You don't even know the difference anymore." From that night onward, the queen locked her door. The boy's paranoia deepened into ritual. He wrapped cloth around his face to avoid catching glimpses in windows or polished marble. He refused to be near soldiers with gleaming armor, demanding that their breastplates be dulled with ash. He scratched his skin raw, hoping to make himself look unlike the image he had seen. And in the darkest hours when the torches guttered low, he whispered into the shadows, "If you are real, step out, show yourself, take me if you dare." Some swore they heard a reply, not in words but in the echo of his voice, bouncing through the empty halls. By the time he turned 18, the palace lived in fear not of prophecy, but of him. The heir to the throne wandered like a ghost, half prince, half specter, consumed by the demon in the glass. The king's advisors pressed him, "Lock the boy away before his madness spreads." Yet the king hesitated, for to confine him was to admit the prophecy had come true. But whether they admitted it or not, the truth was plain. The prince had not simply lost himself. He had found something else, something that lived in every reflection, waiting, patient, and cruel. And the question no one dared speak aloud was this: if the demon lived only in his mind, why did others too begin to feel watch whenever they passed by a mirror? The king could no longer ignore it. The prince's screams shook the walls nightly. Servants deserted in secret. Nobles refused to dine at court, fearing what they might see or what the boy might do. Yet the king clung to silence, insisting that his heir was not mad, only misunderstood. But silence is brittle, and one night it shattered. The guards who stood watch outside the prince's chamber swore they heard two voices. One was his own, the other deeper, colder, and mocking. When they burst inside, the boy was alone, sitting cross-legged before a shard of broken glass he had stolen from the kitchens. His lips moved, his eyes stared, unblinking, but no one else was there. The shard was seized, but whispers spread. The demon no longer needed the mirror. It had found its way into the boy's mind, and now it spoke to him directly. What began as whispers soon infected the palace. Servants swore they glimpsed faces where none should be, in the ripple of a wine cup, in the gleam of polished floors, even in the glisten of tears. The same face over and over, his face or something close enough to unsettle. The prince fueled the terror. He stalked the halls at night, pressing his bloodied hands against the walls, leaving smears like warnings. When questioned, he muttered, "He's coming through. Every mirror is a doorway. Every reflection is a crack in the world." The king ordered every reflective surface destroyed. Windows were shuttered, armor blackened, Water drained from fountains. Even coins were dulled. The palace, once a place of golden brilliance, became a fortress of shadows, stripped of shine. But still, it was not enough. One evening, during a banquet held to prove that the court remained strong, the prince burst into the hall. His face was wrapped in linen, his nails black with dried blood. He tore the cloth away and screamed at the lords and ladies. "Look at me! Tell me who I am! Is this your prince, or the demon who has stolen him?" Panic rippled through the guests. None dared answer, for even as they stared, some swore his features shifted. One moment familiar, the next grotesque, his eyes glowing as though lit from within. The queen fainted. The hall erupted in chaos. The king, humiliated, ordered his son dragged away. But as guards seized him, the boy laughed, a ragged, broken laugh. "It's too late," he howled. "You've seen him too. Now he will not leave you either." That night, nobles abandoned the palace in droves. Carriages lined the road, fleeing into the dark. The dynasty trembled, and the boy's descent grew deeper still. He demanded bowls of water be placed around his chamber, but not for drinking. He crouched over them for hours, whispering to the rippling surface, waiting for answers. Sometimes he screamed and overturned the bowls, convinced the demon was trying to step through. Other times he smiled, speaking as though to a companion no one else could hear. The priests attempted exorcisms. They chanted, burned incense, and pressed crosses against his skin. He laughed at them, eyes rolling back, his voice dropping into a growl that chilled even the most faithful. "Do you think prayers close a door already open?" He spat. "He is inside now. He sees through me. He wears me." The queen begged the king to end it, lock the boy away, spare him in further torment. But the king refused. To admit his heir was lost was to admit that prophecy had triumphed over power. He could not bear it. And so the nightmare continued. The boy began scratching words into the stone floor of his chamber, jagged letters written in blood. Not me, not mine, not face. The guards, once loyal, now feared entering. They claimed the scratches rearranged themselves at night, forming new messages. Let him through. Open the glass. By now, even the court's strongest skeptics whispered that the demon was real, that by denying him his reflection, they had created a void so deep that something else had crept in to fill it. And yet the boy was not the only one unraveling. Servants began waking from dreams in which they clawed at their own faces, desperate to peel away a mask. A maid slit her wrists after swearing that every time she looked at her reflection, it blinked a moment too late. The infection had spread. The palace was no longer a seat of power. It was a madhouse cursed by its own heir. Guests who entered left whispering that no dynasty could survive such horror, and in the echo of those whispers, rebellion began to stir outside the gates. Inside, the prince continued his vigil. He spoke less now, conserving his words, but when he did speak, they were chilling. "The face is not mine, but one day, it will be yours." The palace could no longer contain the madness. What began as whispers in the court spread like a sickness into the streets. Markets filled with rumors. Some said the prince's reflection had been stolen by a demon. Others swore he was never human to begin with. Mothers covered water jars, fearful their children might see a face that was not their own. Blacksmiths dulled every blade they forged. Even beggars avoided polished coins, spitting on them to blur the gleam. And still the fear grew. Travelers reported that in taverns across the kingdom, men smashed mirrors, swearing they had seen their likeness move before they did. A soldier deserted his post, claiming the puddle at his feet had grinned though his mouth was shut. The contagion of terror spread faster than plague. The king tried to stamp it out. He forbade talk of demons. He declared his son heir in good health. He even executed 2 servants for spreading lies. But executions only deepened the dread. If the prince was truly well, why did silence need to be enforced with blood? Inside the palace, the boy was deteriorating. His nails had grown jagged from constant scratching. His voice had taken on strange cadences, sometimes high and frantic, sometimes low and guttural, as if 2 beings fought for control of his throat. One evening, when the guards brought him food, he did not eat. Instead, he dragged the tray close, staring at the faint reflection in the bronze plate. Hours passed. The guards heard him whisper, "He's closer now. The wall is thinner. Soon, soon." By morning, the plate was bent and warped from where he had bitten it. His teeth were bloodied, but his smile stretched unnaturally wide. The queen could no longer bear it. She begged the king to let her speak to their son. Against his better judgment, he allowed it. When she entered the chamber, she found him crouched in the corner, his hair matted, his face bruised from self-inflicted wounds. For a moment, she saw her child in his eyes, the boy she had nursed, the boy who once reached for her hand. She wept. "My son," she whispered, "you are still mine. You are not lost." The prince tilted his head. Then he began to laugh. Not yours, not his, not mine. He wears me, and soon he will wear you. She staggered back, trembling. For just an instant, only a heartbeat, she swore his mouth moved out of rhythm with his words. The queen fled, her heart broken. Word of her terror reached the servants, and within days reached the city. Even his mother fears him, they whispered. From that point, no denial from the king could undo the truth. The prince was cursed, and if he was cursed, then so was the bloodline. Rebellion kindled like fire in dry grass. Farmers refused taxes. Soldiers questioned their oaths. Priests warned that the demon in the prince's body would one day step free, and when it did, it would not stop with him. The kingdom began to fracture. And yet, locked in his chamber, the prince whispered to the shadows with a smile, "Good, let it break. He likes it when things break." The kingdom outside was cracking, but inside the palace, the cracks had already split wide open. The king no longer held court. He locked himself away, drinking heavily, refusing to hear petitions. The queen wept in silence, her body thin from fear more than hunger. The palace, once a place of feasts and music, echoed only with footsteps that hurried and whispers that broke off mid-sentence. And at the center of it all, the prince, the boy who had never seen himself until it was too late. His chamber had become a ruin, walls scrawled with bloody words, floor littered with broken crockery, snapped wood, and strips of torn linen. His body bore the marks of his obsession, clawed cheeks, bruised temples, lips cracked from muttering into shadows. But worse than his wounds was his calm. For weeks he had raged. He had screamed, bitten, torn at his own skin. But now he smiled. He whispered. He waited. Guards swore he no longer slept, that his eyes glowed faintly in the dark, as though lit by something not of this world. They claimed he spoke in two voices at once, his own and a deeper growl that came from behind his teeth. The priests returned for one final exorcism. They drew holy symbols on the walls, sprinkled salt, and pressed relics against his chest. The prince laughed. He bent forward until his forehead touched the stone. His laughter echoed until even the bravest priest dropped his relic and fled. "You are too late," he said. "I am not asking him to leave. I am asking him to enter." That night, the guards heard a sound unlike any before, a low hum like glass vibrating. They burst into the chamber and found the prince kneeling before a bowl of water. The surface rippled, though no hand touched it, and in the ripples they swore they saw not one reflection but two, his face and another, grinning wider, sharper, crueler. When they moved to seize him, the bowl shattered. The prince leapt, stronger than they had ever seen, throwing men across the room with inhuman force. His nails raked deep gouges into the stone itself. The king, dragged from his chambers, witnessed the chaos and fell to his knees. He begged his son to stop, but the boy turned, his head tilted unnaturally and whispered, "Do you see me now, father? Or do you see him?" The king fled. The guards fled. None remained. From that day, the prince was never truly confined again. No lock could hold him. No man dared enter. He wandered the palace freely, face wrapped in cloth, whispering to shadows, pausing before any faint reflection left behind. And the strangest thing, wherever he walked, mirrors cracked, bowls of water stilled, glass shattered. It was as if the palace itself bowed to him. The servants began to call him not prince, but something else, the face that ruled. For though he never sat upon the throne, he commanded more fear than any king before him. And in that fear, the dynasty collapsed. The dynasty ended not with a war, but with a whisper. The prince never ascended the throne. By the time his father died, rebellion had already torn the kingdom apart. The palace gates were stormed, its treasures looted, its banners burned. But in the heart of the ruin, one chamber remained untouched, the chamber without reflections. When the rebels entered, they found him there, kneeling, still wrapped in linen, muttering to the dark. He did not resist them. He only tilted his head and asked, "Do you see me? Or do you see him?" None dared answer. They fled, leaving him behind. Days later, when smoke still rose from the broken palace, scavengers crept in to claim what was left. In the prince's chamber, they found the walls carved with thousands of faces. No two alike, yet all somehow the same. And in the center, a single mirror, standing upright though no one had brought it there. Its glass was cracked, but not shattered. And in that crack, they swore they saw something move. The prince's body was gone. Some say he fled. Others claim he stepped into the glass itself, leaving the world behind. The rebels sealed the chamber, bricked it with stone, and spread the tale that the demon had been buried alive. But stories cannot be buried. Centuries later, the palace lies in ruins. Tourists wander its halls. Scholars pick through its stones. And sometimes when they descend into the foundations, they say they hear scratching, a sound like nails against glass. A few claim to have found shards buried deep in the rubble, shards that still hold a faint reflection, even in complete darkness. And those who have looked too long into that reflection never speak of what they saw. The story of the mirrorless prince was meant to be a warning, a tale of prophecy, madness, and a dynasty destroyed by fear. But perhaps it is something more. Perhaps it is a reminder. Every face you see in the mirror is a stranger you have trained yourself to accept. And if one day that stranger looks back, not quite in sync, not quite yours, will you know the difference? Or will you, like him, claw your skin away, desperate to find who or what wears your face? The boy who had no reflection lives on, not in blood, not in bone, but in the question his life left behind. When you next meet your own gaze in the glass, how certain are you that the one staring back is truly you?